Well, again, good morning, guys. My name is Gerald, and I'm the lead pastor here at Love Lake Norman. We are so glad that you guys have decided to start out 2020 with us this year. I think you made a great choice. Thrilled that you're here. As you heard Leah explain, there's several things happening that you can jump into as you're ready. We started this church more than 2.5 years ago. Actually, in April of 2017, we started right here with a very, very simple goal to help people find and follow Jesus. And so that's what we're about. And what we don't assume is that you're already in a relationship with Jesus, that you're already a Christian. We just don't assume that about everybody. But what we want to do is offer you next steps on your journey. And so we like to say all the time, this is a place where you can belong before you believe. You can find a place here to search and take a next step, whether you're someone who says, I am a committed Christian, a committed Christ follower, or someone who is maybe returning for the first time in a long time to church, or maybe this is brand new for you. We just want to say welcome. We hope this is a great place for you to explore and to be, and we want this to be a place for you to belong. So in order to do that, we're kicking off a new series this year, this decade, right? It's 2020. That's crazy. Like 2020 seems weird. It sounds weird, but it sounds cool, right? Like I think 2020 sounds like a really cool year. And so I'm hoping that you and I both can make it a really banner year, a monumental year. In fact, that you can start out the year saying, I am going to do some things a little bit differently. I am going to take some steps that maybe I haven't taken in the past. I am going to be intentional about some things that I haven't been intentional as I've wanted to in the past. So we're starting this series called Level Up. I played video games a lot when I was a kid growing up in the 80s. In fact, you might have noticed we have 2 old school video games out here. That's on purpose for this whole series because it's got kind of a video game theme, we think Level Up does. But I remember playing Atari, right? And my parents did not buy me an Atari because I was just one of those kids, I begged for one. My parents wouldn't buy me one, but my friends had Atari game systems, and I loved to play Donkey Kong. You remember Donkey Kong? Yep. Right? There's Donkey Kong, that's Mario. You get to be Mario and you try to save the girl. That's the whole goal, is to try to save the girl. I remember spending hours at my friend's house, like going over to spend the night, and we would stay up until way too late trying to level up, trying to get to the next level so that I could be the hero, Mario could save the girl and beat Donkey Kong, and I just could never get there. I mean, I would stay up and I'd be like, just one more game, right? I'm just gonna do it one more time before I go to sleep, and that would, one more. I would continue to do that, and it would be like 12, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and I'm still playing. I remember sitting in my friend's basement trying to beat Donkey Kong, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't ever get to the next level. So if your goal is to level up, that's just something that we kind of are about in life. We want to take next steps. We want to step up to the next level. If your goal in 2020 is to maybe consider taking a step, I think you're in the right place because we all want to improve. We all want to get better. But here's what I want to say. If we do everything else, if we make a bunch of resolutions that are about everything else other than our spiritual lives, then I think that it's kind of like adding a second level to your house when you have a cracked foundation. It's kind of like adding on up above when you haven't really explored what's happening down below the surface. Oftentimes, your home can have cracks or there's wear over time, and we got to pay attention to those things first. But if we do everything else and we don't pay attention to our spiritual lives, it's like not having a very solid foundation. And if your foundation in your life is not very solid, it opens you up to a lot of possibilities, none of which are very good. If you, every once in a while in the news or online, you'll see pictures that pop up of these things that fascinate me, and they're called sinkholes. You ever seen sinkholes, like a picture of a sinkhole that'll pop up usually in Florida, places where there's a lot of water around? These sinkholes will develop. I'm just fascinated by these. Basically, what happens from the outside looking in is that it's this sudden occurrence. It just all of a sudden, things sink, like a car will plunge into the street, or a house will get ready to fall into this hole, and the hole just opens up. But you know what happens with a sinkhole? It's actually a very gradual thing. Underneath the surface, the water starts to seep in, and it could be sandstone or it could be some other kind of rock, and it begins to dissolve the rock. And little by little, the water kind of comes in and it begins to pull it out. It begins to dissolve it, make it softer and softer and softer. Sometimes there's whole caves that are underneath the ground that we don't even know about because a sinkhole has developed over time and the water begins to pull it out and dissolve this area. And so what tends to happen is that we don't see it as something that is that takes time. We see it as a sudden thing. But the top layer, when pressure happens, when pressure begins, when weight is applied, it caves in. And then all of a sudden you've got this hole and you've got this gap. And so it's a crazy thing. Sinkholes are amazing because we tend to think, oh my goodness, what is going on? And yet it's been happening. It could have been happening for years and years and years. By the way, did I lose battery?
I think so.
You can bring them to me. That's fine. We're good. Hang tight. I see you whispering back there.
Nothing to see here.
Let's do it all out in the open. Yes, this is very smooth.
What is this? Not sure.
This is not going to be the issue. We're going to find out. Is that better? If it does, it doesn't matter. Sorry. So here's the thing. Like what I believe about sinkholes is this. Spiritual sinkholes can happen in our life. Spiritual sinkholes can actually take place where we've got it all together on the outside. And it's the beginning of 2020. You guys all look amazing this morning. You do. You look like you got it all together. I try to put myself together like I got it all together. But all of a sudden, sometimes in life, things happen. You ever have a friend where it just they just kind of everything seems to be going along nicely, and then all of a sudden they disappear. Like they don't show up to something, and then you realize I haven't seen them in like a month or 2 months. What happened to them? And you find out that they had an implosion. Something in their life happened, and they just pulled the plug on everything. Then you may also have you have neighbors who all of a sudden you find out, oh gosh, they're getting a divorce, and the moving truck shows up, and it feels very sudden. And what you start to realize is, I'll take it. Yeah. We're going handheld. Second number? All right. Yes. You can control everything with it. You get the cool sound effects. So, spiritual sinkholes can take place in our lives. And that is just the reality, and we often don't see them. But underneath the surface, little by little by little, there is an ebb and a flow, and things begin to dissolve. And we try to make a good front on the outside, and yet that can happen. The reality is that there can be cracks in our foundation, the foundation of our lives, that can go on for a while. And this destruction happens from the inside out. I'm just going to talk. If you want to put a microphone in front of my face, we can do that. What happens with these spiritual sinkholes? Like how do those happen? I think there's about 3 things that take place in our lives. One of them is this: major turmoil happens in your life. That can actually, a sudden occurrence, whether it's a diagnosis or whether it's something that happens, that's a very sudden thing, whether you get some information that's new to you, and then you can implode. That does happen, and that is one of the things that causes spiritual sinkholes in our lives. Another one is this: lack of spiritual challenge. You might have been in a place, in a season of your life, listen, where you've become lazy or bored, or you've become apathetic when it comes to spiritual things. You might be in a place right now where you've just felt like, oh my goodness, that's why I'm here. It's because in 2019, I just felt like I didn't know where I was going spiritually, and it just began to be like I was in a cul-de-sac spiritually, just going around and around in circles, and so I've got to get out of that, and lack of spiritual challenge is one of those things that causes spiritual sinkholes, because all of a sudden, things happen that cause you to sink in. Another one is neglect, not prioritizing our spiritual life. Like I'm just in a season where I haven't prioritized it. Why does neglect take place with those things? Well, the reality is this: it's not a glamorous thing. We're not talking about something that's glamorous or something that's very much an exterior thing in our lives. We want to focus on the exterior things, Because the interior world isn't visible. By definition, it's not visible to you. It's not visible to me. The interior work that we do no one can see it. And let's be honest, there's a real part of us, even with our New Year's resolutions, that we want to hear people say, hey, have you lost weight? You're looking good. We want people to say, have you been in the gym? Because you're looking like a little more buff. Have you been working out? And that's part of the motivation. It's not necessarily always a bad motivation. It's just that we want to hear that kind of feedback from people. And when we focus just on some internal things, it feels like that's not going to really make a difference. People aren't going to really see that. We can convince ourselves that it's not worth it. And so we neglect that part of our lives. And you might be coming here today feeling like, that's me. If I'm honest, that's me. Like I have neglected this area of my life, and I'm starting to feel this emptiness inside. I'm starting to feel like something's pulling away at the interior of my life. And then we have a sinkhole and we don't even know what happened. Sometimes that's the case. You have an implosion in your life and you don't even know what happened. And what's worse and even more harmful is this, that sometimes we don't even know how to diagnose what happened. We don't even know why, because it was this very gradual erosion of my relationship, my connection with God. You just know the feeling of it. You end up in a place where I just feel lost. I feel like I'm in a dead end and I can't get out of it, but I don't really know what to do. So we don't want that to happen to you this year. I don't want it to happen to me this year. We want you to level up. We want you to take another step. But here's what I want you to know today. If you want to level up, the first thing you need to do is actually dig down. If you want to level up, the first thing you need to do is to dig down. Now, there's a guy in the Bible named Peter, and he gives me a lot of hope. Like, I love talking about Peter because he gives me a lot of hope for myself. If you ever been around somebody who you say, like, you see them doing something and you're like, man, if she can do that, then I can definitely do that. And they make you feel like you can do it. If he can accomplish that, I think I can accomplish that too. I think that's kind of how Peter was, especially when you begin to understand who he was at the very beginning of when we discover him in the Bible. He's this uneducated guy, really rough around the edges, says crazy things, kind of runs off at the mouth. He's a fishing boat captain. He's just a dude, like he's just a regular guy, and yet he had this encounter with Jesus. He had begun a friendship with Jesus. He'd begun a relationship with Jesus. And then he was thrown into these leadership roles way too early, probably before he was ready. And all these things happened in his life, and he grew over the course of his life into this incredible leader. And you could do a whole study on him and start from the very beginning to the very end and see this incredible growth. And I think it's because he understood something that we get wrong when it comes to faith. He understood something, and we're going to read about what he says about this here in a minute in one of his letters. Because we think strong faith just happens. We think you have strong faith and maybe you don't, and it just happens. Like it was just given to you. Either you have it or you don't. And then you end up saying things like, I wish I had my grandmama's faith. She's so faithful. Or I wish I was more like my Uncle Bill because he's such a faith-filled person and I'm just not. Like they have that and I don't, and that's just the way that it is. Now, you may not have that kind of faith right now. I may not have that kind of faith right now, but you know why? You know why? It's kind of like if you look at Matt up here playing the electric guitar and you say, hey, Matt is an amazing guitar player. I just can't play guitar like Matt. That's probably true. You know why it's true? Because he's been spending time away from this place in a room somewhere practicing. He's been spending time, hours and hours and hours, practicing the guitar, and you haven't worked like Matt has at the guitar, or you would be as good as him. Now, let me say this. Your relationship with God, and what the Bible calls salvation and this connection with God that's been given to you, it is something that is given and offered to you as a free gift. You just have to say yes. Yeah, our goal is to offer you an opportunity to simply say, yes, that's the start of a relationship with God. He'll never force his way into your life. You can never be grandfathered in because your family did whatever. None of that. It's all your connection, and that is a free gift. But listen, you want to grow in faith? You want to grow in your faith? What you put in is what you get out. When it comes to your faith, when it comes to growing, what you put in is what you get out. Deep faith is not given. Deep faith is earned. Deep faith is not given. Deep faith is earned. Your relationship with God, yes, it's a free gift. But if you want to grow in your faith, you can grow in your faith right now. You can start right now by taking steps to grow into someone who has deeper faith. Now, I want to read to you from one of Peter's letters. At the end of Peter's life, after he'd done all kinds of things, and he was this amazing leader in the church, and God had done so much through his life and taken this guy who was just like this ragtag guy and turned him into this incredible leader. He wrote some of this out for us, for the church. And I'm going to read to you a little bit of 2 Peter chapter 1. We're going to go 5 through 8. We're just going to look at 4 verses this morning together. And I just want to walk you through what he says about how to level up. Because he says, here's how you level up. But you first dig a foundation. You got to dig down into the foundation. If you want to grow in your faith, you can do that. And you got to dig down. And he gives us some clues. He gives us some help to do that. So let's jump into that together. 1 Peter chapter 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5. It starts out by saying this. He says, for this very reason, he says, make every effort to add to your faith goodness. So I want to say something about that, because that make every effort, what he says is apply all, there are other versions of the Bible, other translations that'll say apply all diligence. One of them says apply all diligence. One of them says do your best. And it's this idea of effort. It doesn't just come to you because you're a Christian or someone who says, I follow Jesus. Faith is like a muscle. Now, some of you have said, one of my New Year's resolutions is to get back into the gym. I got to work out. I got to get a little stronger. I got to get more fit. That's a great goal. Faith is like working out a muscle. It's the same thing. Muscles grow when they are exercised, right? If you want your faith to grow, you need to exercise it. You have to work it out. It can grow. But what he says is you got to be diligent about it. Make every effort. You got to do your best. This takes discipline. There's a group of people in our church right now that have decided that along with me, we're reading the New Testament in 30 days in the book in the month of January. We started January 1st and it goes through. Now, first thing, it's not too late for you to participate in that. If you want to get in on that, let me know. But it's going to take discipline. And it's just what we're learning so far in the first week is that it takes a lot of discipline to do something like that. It takes discipline to establish a new habit. And so I have to go, oh my gosh, I got to establish a disciplined approach to immersing myself in the Bible. Here's the cool thing about it. It gets easier pretty much every single day. You do it once, it's kind of hard. It gets a little easier the next day, a little easier the next day, and a little easier the next day because you're getting in the right place to grow the foundation. My goal, one of my goals as a parent this year is I want to make sure that I get my kids in places where they are growing spiritually. I want to make sure that they're in those kinds of places. That doesn't always have to be direct one-on-one with me. And in fact, a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's how do I help get my kids into the proper place, the proper location where they're going to grow spiritually. I am terrible at keeping plants alive in my house. Some of you are really great. You have amazing pictures of gardens and these backyards that are unbelievable. I have a basil plant from Harris Teeter that is still alive. It's been 3 weeks. Can I get some applause for that? No, I know. I don't want to applause for that. 3 weeks, but that's pretty good for us around my house, keeping something alive for 3 weeks. You know why it's alive? Because I followed the directions actually this time. I bought it and it said, it's a plant that's alive. It said, if you keep this in direct sunlight and you add water every single day, this will stay alive. And it does. It's amazing how that works. A little bit of attention to detail. Now, if I took that basil plant and I put it under the cabinet and shut the door, you know what's going to happen? Within a day, it's dead. Of course. The only thing that grows in the darkness is mold. Right? We did a science fair project several years ago And the project was how much mold is going to grow on this piece of bread, depending on where the bread had been and whose hands it had touched, or whether it was, untouched or whatever. And we put it in these plastic baggies and we threw it underneath the counter. And we hid it in the dark. And we would check on it, and this mold started growing like crazy. It was awful, disgusting. But you put something in the right place, it's going to grow. It's a huge spiritual principle. If you put yourself in the right place, you are going to grow. If you're going to grow, these are the areas you want to grow in, then, he says. He says, you want to make every effort to add to your faith goodness. Add to your faith goodness. And the word goodness implies this moral excellence. And the interesting thing that in the Bible, the opposite of this word in the Bible is actually the word greed. The opposite of goodness is greed. Greed is this insatiable desire for more. And gosh, that is so much our world, isn't it? It's the world that we live in. It's the temptations that we have. It's what we have so often is this insatiable desire for more. And what he's saying is, no. We got to be people who are content with what we've been given. Content with what God has provided. And there's goodness that flows out of that. He says, add to your faith goodness. And you can do this. You can add to your faith goodness. This is something that you can work at. And then he says, and to goodness, add knowledge. Add knowledge. And it's not just to make me smarter. Knowledge, like I need that for sure. God made me smarter, but it's not just the intelligence that word is implying. The word is knowledge of the gospel. Knowledge of who Jesus is and what he's done that leads us to grow more like him. Knowledge is knowledge of the gospel that leads me to grow more like Jesus. The more that I think about him, the more that I dwell on him, the more that I talk to other people about him. So how do I do that? How do I grow in knowledge? Well, I think I got to read about him. I got to open myself up to him. I got to think about him. I got to wrestle with the questions that I have. I got to be real with us. I got to have conversations with people. I got to invite people in. I got to get below the surface with other people so that we're not just talking about the football games today. We are talking a little bit more, and more in depth about what is going on in my life. What's God up to? Where can I hear him? What is he saying? And what does it mean for me to orient my life around him and not myself? That's a little bit about what knowledge is. And then he says you can add to knowledge self-control. Self-control, what a great word, because we have this natural draw to our selfish nature. We just do. We have a natural bent towards selfishness, but when we're diligent about it, he's saying you can establish control over that. You can begin to establish self-control. Some of us feel like you're totally out of control. Life doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. And I know that you often feel that way, but there are steps that we can take to begin to have more self-control. And when you take these little steps over and over again, you'll be amazed at what happens. And he says then, add to self-control perseverance. You know what perseverance is? It is God-like patience with people and circumstances in my life. God-like patience with people and circumstances in my life. Like some of you probably are thinking, I could have used a lot of that over the holidays. Like, especially with the people in my family, right? Or the people that are around me. I could have used a lot of God-like patience, right? When my uncle brought up the political discussion or my cousin had too much to drink, I need God-like patience. Like all those, I need God-like patience. And I say God-like because of this. Because God is incredibly patient with you and with me. And he's incredibly patient with our world. A lot of times you hear, and when we ask, God, why didn't you do this? Or why are you letting this happen right now in our world? But the question really needs to become, what is it that is keeping God's wrath from this world? What is it that is holding back his righteous judgment from this place? You know what it is? His loving kindness, his patience with us and with this world, inviting us to follow him. We need perseverance. He's saying you can add that to your faith. You can actually grow in your perseverance. That's pretty cool. You can become someone with more perseverance in your life. And then he says, and to perseverance, add godliness. Godliness. Now that's such a Christian, like a religious, churchy word. godliness, but let's dig into it for just a minute. In the Greek word is eusebeia, and it's actually a combination of two words together. The word good and the word worship. The word good is you, the word worship is sebomai, and they combine those two words together. And so this idea of godliness literally is good worship. It's good worship. It's not perfection. It's not doing everything right and nothing wrong. It's just this idea that true worship, good worship, is me living daily in a way that puts the gospel, that puts Jesus as central to my life. It's trying to put Jesus as the center point of my life, that's godliness, and godliness will flow out of that kind of place in my life. It's not about being perfect. It's about Jesus being perfect and me orienting myself to his perfection. So it's add to perseverance, godliness, and he's almost done, but he says add to godliness, mutual affection. And what he's really meaning is this love for one another. Like what does it look like to love? Like we got to add love and mutual affection to one another, because none of those things up above are any good if we don't love one another well. If they don't turn into love for each other and love for our world, none of those things really matter. I can become all these things in my own head, in my own life, but if it doesn't pour out, it doesn't show in love, something incredibly wrong is with that picture. Add to godliness mutual affection, and then mutual affection, he says, add love. And that word love is this idea of grace-filled love. It's not like, hey, I'll love you if you love me. Let's do that. Like it's conditional, right? I'll love you if you love me. No, that's not what it is. My love for you isn't contingent on your love for me. That's what he is saying. It's grace-filled love, the kind of love that Jesus has for you and for me it's not contingent on whether I return the favor or return the love or not. You can become somebody who loves in that way in your life. That is attainable. That can be a part of your life this year. Isn't that amazing? That's through his power, his grace, not yours, but it's available to you. Why does that matter? Like, why does all of that matter? Why does it even matter to talk about leveling up, taking another step? Peter gets at the answer in this next verse, and he says it like this. Here's why it matters. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, if you grow, if you level up, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. When we make resolutions, so often they're about, I want to be more effective, I want to be more productive. Those two categories pretty much cover all of our resolutions. I want to be more effective. I want to be more productive. There's something in us that desires to be effective, that in other words, that it needs to work. Like this needs to work. And there's something in us that desires to be productive. In other words, it needs to produce something that lasts. We have that innate desire within us to be effective and to be productive in a way that impacts people's lives for a long time, not just for a short time. The truth is this: most resolutions are not effective for the long haul, and they're not productive for the long haul. They don't produce lasting results. But when you make a strategic decision to grow in your faith, it might not get all the glory. It might not get all the fanfare. It might not get anybody to even notice right away. But when you make a strategic decision to grow in your faith, it produces lasting results. It will produce lasting results. So let me ask you this question today. I just want to ask you one question and see, you can take your answer. You can answer it now. You can answer it later. I want you to consider this. Would you consider making your faith the priority of your life in 2020? Not a priority, not among 3 priorities or even 2 priorities. Would you consider making your faith the top priority in 2020? For some of you, that could mean I just need to keep exploring. Like I'm going to put my exploration of who God is to the top shelf. For others of you, it could mean a lot of other things. Like this is the step I'm going to take to grow in my relationship with God. Would you consider making your faith the top priority in 2020? Now, I think that that's not as easy to answer as you might think. That's not as easy. I think it's harder than you might think, because it means focusing inward first, not on the outward. It means not following the trends, like not following maybe what everybody else is doing or saying or tweeting about. It may mean that you're doing something different. It may mean that you're intentionally neglecting something else so that you, for a period of time, can focus here, can focus on your faith, can focus on your relationship with God. It might take faith to do that because what you're saying is, my interior work is more important, but it's not visible. And so I'm gonna bank on doing some interior work, and I'm gonna bank on that paying off in the long run. And that's where I'm putting my effort this year. That's where I'm putting my heart. That's where I'm putting my passion. That's where I'm putting my hours of my day. That's where I'm putting my thoughts. That's where I'm putting my relationships into my faith. Would you be willing to say yes to that question? If you want to level up, first you got to dig down. If you want to level up, first thing you got to do is dig down. I'm going to give you just a couple of very practical ways to do it. These are things that you could come up with. If you stood up here, you could say probably the same thing, all right? I'm just going to say them for all of us. One of them is this. If you want to level up, start digging at the foundation, you want to start digging down and checking out the foundation. One of them is this. Start reading the Bible. I just start reading the Bible. If you don't have one, you can look at YouVersion. It's a great app, Bible reading app. It'll give you plans in there even to follow along. It makes it really easy for you. But you can start reading the Bible. I would start in one of the like the book of John or the book of Matthew, a place where you can get face to face with Jesus. What would it look like for you to say, okay, this is the way that I'm going to grow in my faith this year. I'm going to start reading the Bible again, or I'm going to dig into it like I haven't before. I'm going to make that a priority in my life. Don't feel guilty about not doing it. Just do it. Just jump in. Start reading the Bible. Second thing is this. Would you be willing to make church a priority? Now, it's not some magic thing. It's not some ritual you have to do every week. It's not like nobody's here taking attendance, just so you know. And you've already decided, I'm making church at least a part of my day to day. Could I invite you to make it a priority this year? You know why? Because you're like that basil plant sitting in my kitchen right now. And you need to be in the sunlight. You need to put yourself, you need to put your family in places where you can grow. And so that is one way, an easy way where you can take yourself and put yourself in a place where you're surrounded by people who want to grow, you're surrounded by an environment that's going to help you grow, and you're going to be in a place where you can grow. Are we perfect around here? No. I mean, you can be a part of any church and put yourself in a place of growth. I would invite you to make church a priority in your life in 2020. Now's a great time to do it. You've started out strong already. You're here. Start reading your Bible. Make church a priority. The third thing is this. Put yourself around other people who want to grow too. Put yourself around other people who want to grow. There are a million ways to do this. We have two here that we offer people often. And one of those, you heard Leah talk about earlier, our crews, our Bible studies, where we have people who get together in the same room and try to study and ask questions and encourage and challenge one another. And that is where real growth happens. Let me tell you, if I were to line up people up here who are growing in their faith, you know what they would say? They wouldn't all point to, wow, it was like sitting in church every single week. They would say, I'm around a group of people who are encouraging me. I'm around a group of people who are sharpening me and challenging me. This is a community thing. This is like a team sport. It's not a solo sport here, this thing called faith. It's a team sport. You need other people around you to make you better. We offer crews as a way to do that. We also offer serving teams as a way to do that, because you jump on a serving team here, all of a sudden you're around people who are serving, who are using their gifts, who are wanting to grow in that way, and it's like throwing gasoline to the fire of your faith. Those three things. Start reading the Bible. Make church a priority. Put yourself in places where you're around other people who are growing. Over the next few weeks, we're going to talk more about what it looks like to level up in specific areas of our life. Next week, we're going to talk about what it looks like in my most important relationships. How do I help take those to another place in my life? And if you're like me and we all got relationships in our lives that could be better, or relationships where things are difficult, I just want to invite you back here as we jump into some things that God tells us through the scripture that are amazing and transformational when it comes to that part of our lives. But I can't think of any better way to start out the year than to sort of draw a line in the sand and mark this moment if you're saying, yes, I want to make my faith the top priority in my life, we're going to do that today by celebrating communion together. We're going to do that today by saying, hey, this is true of me. And communion is this symbolic thing that is so critical and so crucial that Jesus himself instituted it. He said, I want you to, when you do this, I want you to remember me. I want you to remember what I've done. And I want you then, as you take it, to say, okay, this is who I am. This marks me like nothing else. So I'm going to invite you in just a minute to do that, but I want to pray for you first, okay? Can we pray together? God, maybe there are some in this room today who are returning and are ready to just say, my decision, God, today is just to come back. It's maybe just to come back. And so I'm going to make a commitment today to make church a part of my life. I want to make a commitment to open myself to new relationships where people can encourage me and challenge me. I'm going to be humble enough to allow someone else to speak into my life. That may be where some of us are today. God, would you just meet us right there in that moment? God, there are some of us today who are just ready to say yes to a relationship with you. And if that's the case, God, I would just simply offer this prayer. I surrender to you. I give myself to you. I offer myself. And I invite you in, God, to work and to move in my life. There are others of us here who are just going to say, yes, I'm so excited to reprioritize, and I want to reprioritize when it comes to my faith. Whatever happens with the rest of my life, I can't tell the future. God, only you know that, but whatever happens from this day forward, I'm going to put my faith in you first. I'm going to put my relationship with you first. I'm going to do what you asked me to do first, and then let everything else fall by the wayside and let everything else fall into place. And God, it is so amazing that when we do that, you take care of everything in our lives. Doesn't mean things are going to be easy. It doesn't mean everything gets untangled right now. It doesn't mean that the messes in our lives aren't still messes, God. It just means that we're acknowledging that nothing has come through your hands. Nothing has surprised you, God, in our lives. Everything that comes to us has come through your hands first. So God, as we step to your table this morning, may it be a place of celebration. May it be a place of joy. May it also be a place of just soberly examining our lives and our hearts, taking a few minutes to say, this is what is true of me, God. You love me. You want to be in a relationship with me, and that's going to be the most important thing in my life. We pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.